and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics Live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very, very high above, all the puerile and insipid bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. I have a lot to say today, my friends. And you know, when I open the program and I say from very high above the Wyoming mainstream media, I am referring to the people that you generally think of in the Wyoming media. The Cow Pie, the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, Wild Pile, all of those outlets that, they think that they're the elitists in the Wyoming media. But I'm also talking to those people who have a job to do and yet refuse to do it. Refuse to tell you what's going on in their legislature. So this morning, baby, the gloves are off, and I've got so much to say this morning. But first, my friends, it's Open Line Thursday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. This is the day when we talk about whatever you want to talk about. Normally during the week, you have to kind of talk about what I'm going to talk about, or I'm just not going to answer the phone. But today is all about the Cowboy State Politics listeners. So if there is something on your mind, something you want to talk about, then you just go ahead and give me a call. The phone number here in the studio down in the Middle Swamp is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If there is something on your mind that you want to talk about, or if you want to just chime in on what's been happening in the Wyoming legislature, feel free. Give me a call. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. So one more time, that phone number is 307-374-8989. Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. Now, we begin this morning with a little conservative porn, some unexpected conservative porn. Late last night in the House of Representatives, they were still debating the budget. The supplemental budget, which should not be confused with the biennial budget that was passed last year, the one the Wyoming Constitution tells us we pass every other year for the normal operations of government. And then in the off years, we have now, apparently, every year a supplemental budget, which the governor says is for emergencies and things that are unexpected. Now, really, we know that Governor Gordon didn't believe that at all because his supplemental budget was chock full of a whole bunch of crap that we didn't need. Well, late last night, and I don't think I got back to the studio until, close to 10:30 maybe, but they were debating all sorts of amendments. And in fact, one of the Appropriations Committee members told me yesterday that there were 44 amendments totaling around $350 million that members of the House of Representatives wanted to add to the supplemental budget. Well, right at the end, I think like Amendment 37 or Amendment 38, the world-class shooting complex came up. And there were a number of amendments, one of which was to kill the darn thing, to say, we've already spent $10 million, and now we're going to put the skids on it. You guys figure it out. That's plenty of taxpayer money. We're done. Now, there was a lot of pushback on that because a lot of representatives have become very invested in this shooting complex. And I'll admit that at the beginning, I was seduced by it. And it was kind of a complicated issue because originally the shooting sports complex, the one that it's been in the news, it's going to be up in Cody. But originally it was going to be $10 million. And those dollars were going to be taken out of the tourism fund. The tourism fund is generated by the lodging tax. And originally, the lodging tax was supposed to sunset at $12 million after they'd collected that amount. But in reality, the lodging tax collected $40 million. And that money was being used for a whole bunch of nefarious things, drag shows and giving condoms to Wyoming Equality, and a whole bunch of stuff that Wyoming citizens really don't care about and really think are wrong. And so the idea was to take $10 million of that money and put it towards something good, something that Wyoming citizens would love and be proud of. And thus, the world-class shooting complex was born. Now, a second caveat to this, and this is also what kind of seduced me a little bit, is that eventually it would be turned over to private hands. And, so it passed, and I think this was like 2 years ago. My dates are kind of all fading together. But anyway, it passed. Well, then the task force was put together, and it became very evident very quickly that this was not going to be turned over to private hands, that the state was always going to be involved. And as a general rule, my friends, I don't want the government anywhere near my guns at all. Period. Nowhere in the vicinity. I don't want them to have anything to do with my things that go boom. Well, now they are. And there was a number of amendments last night. But interestingly enough, there was some straight up conservative porn that was laid out on the House floor last night. I want to begin with Representative Mike Schmid. Listen to what he said about this shooting complex. This is really good. And then I've got one more soundbite from yet another unexpected source. But listen to Mike Schmid. You're going to love this.
As a solid Second Amendment supporter, a believer that you can't have too many weapons of your choice, and I'd love to see a great shooting complex like this in Wyoming, but this is just simply not the state's job to put this facility up. This is not what the state is supposed to do. The state is supposed to create an environment for private business to take on a project like this. Low taxes, few regulations, get out of the way and let private industry do what they do best. This is not the state's function. And I say that, if this was such a great investment, why hasn't private industry already done it?
Ding, 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 ding. There's the answer to the $10 million question. Why hasn't private industry done this? Because it's probably not profitable. Because if it were profitable, private industry would have already put it together and would have already done it. Now, he goes on for another, I don't know, this whole soundbite is about 6 minutes long. And I'll play a little bit more for you in just a second. But I just wanted to comment on it, that this is not the role of government. There are so many things that our state government and our federal government are involved in that is not the proper role of government. It is not the job of the government to set up golf courses or shooting ranges or Broadway theaters like the one in Rock Springs where they host drag shows. That's not the role of government. The role of government is to remain small, to handle only those things that are enumerated to it by the Constitution. And the actual jobs that you should engage in are pretty simple. Police, fire. It'd be nice to have some roads. The administration of the city. Okay, that probably doesn't take too much. But beyond those small things, it's not the job of government. Really, when you get down to it, the only job of government is to protect the rights of its citizens and to provide those essential services. That's it. But where we get all screwed up is this idea that because we have money and because there's money laying around, then we can go ahead and spend it however we want. But what we soon realize is that when government gets involved, it tramples all over private business. And the point here is that continually in government and with this shooting complex, we're picking winners and losers. Now, he goes on to talk about the guys that set up private shooting ranges up around Cody. There's 3 of them up around there. And, that takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of hard work. And here the state is going to come in and drop a $20 million shooting complex, which I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. And I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But what about those 3 guys that put together those other shooting complexes? What about them? The ones that spent their money, that didn't get any help from the government. Now they have to compete with the government enterprise. How do you think that's going to work out? Let's listen to a little bit more of this.
We've got a lot of weapons manufacturers and ammunition companies and people coming into this state. Why aren't they building this? I got a pretty good reason why, because it's not financially suitable yet.
Boom.
They don't see the market for it. But they'd probably love to see us build one, because they're going to have a lot of good products they can promote in a facility like this. And then another thing, is Wyoming really a place for this facility? I mean, I've heard talk about facilities in the state south of us. That's quite a different environment down there. It's pretty balmy there year round. I know the facility they're talking about.
All right. I think you get the point. But, you wouldn't expect that representatives in Wyoming, in a conservative state, would be saying no to a big, giant shooting sports complex. But the thing is not the role of government. It tramples all over private business. It's picking winners and losers. It's getting government involved in our guns. And frankly, I think it's just wrong. Now, there are a lot of other representatives, some of whom that I really respect, that made good arguments that basically amounted to, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. We made this commitment a couple of years ago, and we need to follow through on it. Okay, I get that argument too, but that doesn't mean that it's conservative, and it sure as heck doesn't mean that it's the proper role of government. Now, let me just give you one more soundbite, and I think we can get through this one pretty quick. This is Representative Bob Wharf. Now, I have my own personal problems with Bob Wharf, but last night he was spot on with this. Here's what he had to say about this shooting sports complex.
I have to rise in opposition to this, and I hate to do it. Most of you know that I have been a very staunch advocate for our Second Amendment rights. But I really wonder if this body 2 years ago would have had somebody here to talk to them and tell them about Pittman-Robertson Dingell-Johnson dollars. It's an excise tax. It's on our hunting and fishing products, which means when you buy a rifle or you buy ammunition, if you're buying a gun for $700, it's got an excise tax that the manufacturer already paid for that item. It's built into that, so that when we buy that, those monies go back. They're returned to the states based on a formula that is derived from the number of licenses sold and the size of your state. What's troubling to me is we've had a hook and bullet department that for years has been bringing in up to $20 million in Pittman-Robertson Dingell-Johnson dollars. That when it was first created, the primary purpose of Pittman-Robertson Dingell-Johnson dollars was to promote shooting sports and hunter safety. Had we been doing what we should have been doing, we'd have shooting ranges all around. Now, the bringer of this amendment brought up the fact that we got 2 or 3 ranges that currently exist that are privately operated. If it was your business, how would you feel if the state came in and threw something on top of your business?
Exactly.
Granted, they're probably not retiring. The guys that built those ranges, probably not going to retire by the money that they're making on that. But I've tried to build a range in my county. And I can tell you, it was a 2-man show, 3-man show some days. But it has been a long, hard drudge. We're still working on it. We're slowly putting it together. I know of numerous ranges that have all done this, piece by piece by piece by piece. And I really wonder if this body would have been aware that there's already a mechanism in place that this state could have been using to do this. Would they have been so willing to commit the state to do it? We already heard one person testify that when you're digging a hole, if you realize that you're in trouble, you don't keep digging. And I think we got to stop digging. So with that, I would urge your support. Thank you.
There we go. Exactly right. The state of Wyoming is already bringing in tens of millions of dollars every year that are for this express purpose. Because we have allocated those dollars to do something that they're not intended to do, now we're taking more money and we're dumping more of it, albeit from the tourism dollars that would probably be used for all sorts of nefarious purposes, and we're putting it into this shooting sports complex, which, by the way, is not the proper role of government. It's picking winners and losers, and it's definitely not conservative. And I'll admit, in the beginning, I was absolutely for this, but I've since changed my mind. I don't think this is a good idea, even though there's something to be said from preventing the liberals from using all of that money in the tourism fund for, their drag shows and they're giving condoms to Wyoming Equality and whatever else they're doing with it. But still, it's not conservative. It's competing with private business. And at this point, my personal opinion is what the House of Representatives should have done is just put the skids on it. Said, we've given you $10 million. That's enough. Raise the rest of it privately. Do whatever you want to do, but we're out. $10 million is a heck of a lot of money. Now, I had a conversation with somebody in the gallery yesterday, and the question was, what could I do with $1 million? Or $2 million. Think about that. What could I build? Now, granted, building costs have gone up, and $1 million doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, but this is such a huge amount of money that if it were managed properly, if it were managed privately, if it were private funds, it would be managed efficiently, it would be managed effectively, and you wouldn't be picking winners and losers. Now, we heard both of those representatives, Worf and Schmid, say that there's all sorts of private industry that's really interested in this. And one of the reasons why is they don't have to put their money up because the state is going to build this thing and they've got a free venue to plop out all sorts of their products all over the place. And last, and I think this is probably one of the most important parts of this whole thing, is I don't want the government anywhere near my guns. They can stay the heck away. The Second Amendment says what it says, and the government doesn't need to be anywhere near my firearms. And I don't really care how great it sounds and how much we love our guns. Government and guns, there's only one reason those two should come into conflict, and it's to prevent tyranny from the government. I think this is a bad idea, and I think the House of Representatives made a bad choice here. Albeit, it was a choice that was kind of made for them years ago. When we come back, we're going to talk about the halfway point, what's happening in the Wyoming Senate. I'm dying to tell you about it. Next. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel
Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand, and there is nothing that the Redcoats can do about it. You can listen to the show on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, on the Cowboy State Politics Podcast, pretty much everywhere. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, documented to be almost always right, 99.97%, 98 point, whatever the number is. It's way up there. I should recalculate it just so that we're entirely accurate, But at this point, I'm right so often that why even worry about the number? I mean, the mainstream media way down here, me high atop the Wyoming media. Well, breaking news, I just got a text message from U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. And this is really important, my friends, that Secretary Doug Burgum has pulled both the Rock Springs RMP and the Buffalo RMP for further review. This is huge news for the state of Wyoming, my friends. It is absolutely incredible. Thank you, Doug Burgum. Thank you, Harriet Hageman, for your work, and John Barrasso and Cynthia Lummis also. This is a major thing for the state of Wyoming and for the country as well. The Buffalo RMP, though it didn't get as much play as the Rock Springs RMP, it pretty much would have shut down coal mining for, the vast majority of the United States. This is a big deal. Thank you, Representative Hageman, and thanks for getting back to me and letting me know that this is absolutely official. This is a very exciting day in the state of Wyoming, my friends. And anyway, having fun on today's program. Oh, by the way, it's Open Line Thursday. So if you want to chime in on the RMP in Rock Springs or in Buffalo, or if you want to talk about the shooting sports complex, there's valid arguments on either side. I just don't believe that it's the role of government. Go ahead and give me a call. The phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. That's the phone number in the studio. Whatever's on your mind, this is Open Line Thursday, and it's all about you. Whether you call or not, I leave the phone lines open. So let's go to the cow pie. Or first, shall I say,
horse crap.
Horse crap is what we're going to talk about a lot during today's program. From the cow pie, halfway point, new conservative majority versus old guard minority in the 2025 legislative session. Well, really, even though Trotsky is setting it up to be like, well, it's the old guard minority versus the majority. In the House of Representatives, it's not much of a fight at all. In fact, the old guard Wyoming caucus minority kind of went out with a whimper. And, we should have thrown them a party. They've been in power for so long, they screwed up the state as best they could. We should have thrown them a going away party. Out with the old, in with the new, the Happy Days Are Here Again song, all of that. Anyway, here's what Trotsky has to say, and I quote, "There haven't been many surprises regarding how the 2025 Wyoming legislative session has played out. In fact, the sheer predictability about the session so far may be the most surprising part. Nearly all of the new freshman lawmakers have voted as they were expected to vote, and the Wyoming Freedom Caucus has wielded its majority in the House vigorously, pushing through top priorities at an expedited pace." Now, that's a fascinating phrase right there, at an expedited pace, because if you go about a page and a half down in Trotsky's article, he pretty much says the House is moving at a snail's pace. So which is it, Trotsky? I mean, do you just throw out whatever phrase you think is going to get people to agree with you, and you don't really give a crap about contradicting yourself? But listen to this passage. I really love this. Actually, there's a number of things in this article that I absolutely love. But listen to this. Quote, State Representative Landon Brown believes the Freedom Caucus members are still being told how to vote by their local leaders, which he believes are making their top concern. Quote, "I think I'm beyond frustrated that every bill comes out of the Freedom Caucus is perfect," he said. "You can't amend it, and the only way you're going to amend it is if they are in control of that amendment." But Brown also admitted that voting dynamic wasn't much different in recent years past, with the roles simply reversed between caucus members and more mainstream Republicans. In other words, Landon Brown, which, by the way, it's been 1,470 some odd days, I think, since Landon Brown agreed to an interview on Wyoming's most popular political program and didn't show up. Yeah, so Landon Brown, shut up a minute. You just don't like it that the shoe is on the other foot. Anyway, let's see here. Representative John Baer, chairman emeritus of the Freedom Caucus, holds an opposite perspective than Brown, saying the new minority has shown it's much more in lockstep than the Freedom Caucus colleagues. And actually, they did last time, too. Last year. If you looked at the results of the voting on Evidence-Based Wyoming, which is a great site, by the way, there's a number of rating sites that I think are really good. I use Evidence-Based Wyoming and WyoVote. I think those are the most accurate. But the results of the voting of the Wyoming caucus are all the liberal redcoats in the House. I mean, there was a really close dot, a really, really tight collection of dots, which indicated they all voted together. And if you look at the conservatives, man, there was a broad range of how they voted. Now, some people are more conservative than others. So, I mean, it clearly shows that Landon Brown and Trotsky are full of crap on this one. So the next point here is, and this one is really just bull crap
Horse crap.
on face. Quote, the Wyoming caucus formed in the spring of 2023 as a block of House Republicans in opposition to the Freedom Caucus. Their membership ranks were somewhat hazy, and beyond a few leading members, it wasn't always clear who was in their group.
Horse crap.
Yeah, that's total horse crap, because it was very, very clear who was in the Wyoming caucus, because they all voted the same. It was Albert Somers' little pack of redcoat rhinos, and it was pretty darn clear who was in charge. They even said it on the floor. It was Representative Barry Crago, who, by the way, WYGO and all their sycophants, they're saying that Barry Crago is now a conservative. Laughable, absolutely hypocritical on their part to even claim that, though they have to, because they're the ones that supported Poison Barry. Anyway, very, very clear who the redcoats were. Let's see here. The next one here, and listen to this part. You're going to love this. Brown and Representative Mike Yin do not believe that these issues represent top concerns for Wyoming residents. And of course, what they're referring to is the mandate that was given to House Republicans and actually conservatives across the breadth of the Wyoming legislature this election to fix the spending, to tackle the things that Wyoming citizens really care about. And the reason you know that you have a mandate is if you actually go door to door and you actually talk to your constituents. The Wyoming Freedom Caucus did a lot of polling during the off season, and it became very, very clear what Wyoming citizens really cared about. And one of those top things, number 4 on their polling list, I think, was all this DEI crap. And so don't tell me that they don't have a mandate, but listen to what Trotsky says. Quote, Brown and Yin do not believe these issues represent the top concerns for Wyoming residents. Quote, I think what it ultimately boils down to is these people are more focused on running political campaigns than they're worried about running the state, Brown said. Yeah, right. The only reason that Landon Brown and Mike Yin, and in fact, I like Mike Yin. He's in very much the same position that he was last year, except he's not winning as much votes because his liberal pals are not in favor. And actually yesterday, I got to tell you about this. After the session, I'm walking down the stairs from the House chamber, and Mike Yin is behind me, and he makes a crack about the shooting sports complex. And I turn around and say, Mike, that was the best defense of the Second Amendment that I've ever heard out of a Democrat. And he says, make no mistake, David, it wasn't about the guns. It was about spending. I'm a Democrat. I'm always in favor of spending. And I kind of laughed and I said, well, nonetheless, I thought it was a pretty good speech he gave. And afterwards, he talked about going to the governor's match, several times, and how he really likes guns. And his last comment was, David, I love guns. I just don't like them everywhere that you do. And that is exactly the point there. But listen to this next part. And this is where we're going to get into what I've been dying to talk to you about for an entire day, until this finally boiled over yesterday for me. And I said, you know what? The gloves are off now. I am sick of this. So listen to this. Quote, during a press conference on Tuesday, Senate President Bo Biteman criticized members of the House for chasing news headlines and being influenced by out-of-state interests, a sentiment Brown agrees with. Quote, I'm just calling out the noise, all the grandstanding that's been going on, and quite frankly, the attacks on my members in the Senate. I don't like it, Biteman said. Well, Bo, as it refers to anything that you think has come from me, it's not an attack if it's absolutely true. if anyone is speaking the truth about what is happening in the Wyoming Senate, that is not an attack. That's just speaking the truth. And you and your pals, my friend, there is a whole bunch of stuff that we got to talk about. Now, let me just respond to some of the folks on social media that I've been hearing about yesterday. And by the way, it takes a ton of courage to block somebody from what you're posting and then go ahead and talk about them behind their back. That takes a heck of a lot of courage. It just shows that you're too darn scared as to what the response is going to be. So a lot of courage there, guys. But anyway, so first of all, Bo Beitman and Tim Salazar did make a deal with Tara Nethercott and the Redcoats in the Senate for them to get power. That is an unmistakable fact. Another fact is that they absolutely did give 7 of the 10 committees to the liberals. That is a fact, and we are seeing the results of it right now. And those people who say, well, the Wyoming Senate, they've been really, really conservative. And David, you're just a liar because, Tara Nethercott voted for the tax cut bill. Yeah, I've got something for those people who say that too. And we're going to talk about it after the break. But my point here is there's a whole bunch that's happening in the Wyoming Senate that nobody is talking about. And again, there's people in that Senate that should be. I'll tell you about it right when we come back. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to FreedomGoldUSA.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if your silver is right for you. One more time, that's FreedomGoldUSA.com/David. Welcome back to the program, Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989, Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. Whatever's on your mind, you can give me a call and we'll talk about it. Now, before the break, I started to talk about what's been happening in the Wyoming Senate. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that has come to light yesterday. And I guess, you know what? Let's just start at the top. I always told you that at some point this session, the wheels are going to start to come off this whole conservative facade that's been put on. I've been told by so many people, well, all the committees in the Senate, they're conservative. No, they're not. 7 of 10 of them are controlled by lifetime liberals. And eventually they're going to get tired of playing this whole conservative game, and they're just going to start doing their own thing. And they already have. Now, to respond directly to some folks that are evidently fans of the program, just because Tara Nethercott made one good vote on the on Senate File 69, that does not mean that she's a conservative, nor has she ever been. In fact, you have to look at what she said, the reason why she voted that way. Let me just enlighten you, and let me take you back to what the Cowboy said in, let's see here. This article is entitled, Legislature Explores How to Slash Taxes Without Gutting Schools and Local Services. And this one was published on January 29th. Now, I'm talking about Senate File 69. That's now the 50% reduction of property taxes in the state. Now, on yesterday's program, on the podcast, I played you several sound bites of what the senators are saying and why they actually voted for it. And the essential point is so that they can punish Wyoming citizens. So Wyoming citizens can understand the consequences of tax cuts. Listen to what Tara Nethercott told the Cowboy, and I quote, Senator Tara Nethercott told the Cowboy State Daily that she supports removing local backfills, and here's the important part, as a way of helping voters understand the cause and effect relationship between taxes levied and services rendered, which they can make future decisions based on. Quote, we want to find the right policy so people can understand the connection between property taxes and services offered more correctly. So the people who want tax relief, in other words, not Tara Nethercott, so those other people who want tax relief can have a better understanding of the consequences and the lack of that tax revenue from fiscal policy. In other words, the vote was not because it was conservative. Her vote was not because Wyoming citizens absolutely deserve a tax break. It was so she can punish Wyoming citizens for even advocating for a tax break, to punish those people that signed the people's petition to reduce taxes by 50%, so they could understand the consequences of those decisions. And it wasn't just Tara Nethercott. It was John Kolb, and it was Stacey Jones, and it was Bill Landon, and it was a whole bunch of people on the floor of the Senate, most of those sound bites I played for you yesterday. So it wasn't a conservative vote, though it appears that way. And anybody that claims that shows how conservative Tara Nethercott is frankly out of their mind crazy, because it doesn't make any sense. The only reason that you see folks supporting Tara Nethercott and claiming that she's a conservative is because they've been sucked into this liberal juice over in the Wyoming Senate. Let's talk about the CO2 bill, Sherry Steinman's bill, the one that would have classified CO2 not as a pollutant. The committee, of which Tara Nethercott is a member, killed that bill. Oh, and then there's Senate File 124. This one's fantastic, though Tara Nethercott wasn't on this committee. So, in other words, and let me just put this as simply as I possibly can. So Tara Nethercott made one good vote, in your opinion, but her really conservative Senate and her really conservative committees killed what is considered to be probably the best immigration bill in the country. They didn't kill it, they gutted the crap out of it, so that it really doesn't do anything. So it's going to go to the floor still, but the thing is, it's pretty well gutted. And we'll see what happens in the Senate. I mean, there's a fair chance that it's going to come out of the Senate, but it pretty much got gutted. So how conservative, I ask you, how conservative could that possibly be? Well, let me give you just one more. If you're not convinced with all of that, it would appear that the ultra-conservative Bo Beitman and Tim Salazar and Tara Nethercott are now fundraising with Governor Mark Gordon. Cowboy State Politics has come into possession of an invitation to a fundraiser put on by something called the 307 Senate Leadership PAC. And just let me read for you what the opening paragraph of it says, and I quote, Please join us on February 27th at 6 p.m. for an evening of networking, discussions, and collaboration with esteemed members and supporters of the 307 Senate Leadership PAC. This mixer provides a unique opportunity to engage with influential leaders and contribute to the future success of our initiatives. Our special guests include the new Wyoming Senate Leadership Senators Bo Beitman, Tim Salazar, and Tara Nethercott, and several key committee chairs and senators. Last month, we were honored with a very special guest, Governor Mark Gordon. We look forward to seeing you at this fundraiser on February 27th. Sincerely, Jeff Wallach, chairman. Details. Save the date for February 27th at the Metropolitan Downtown on Cary Avenue in Cheyenne. Please use the private entrance on 17th Street to avoid walking through the restaurant. You're going to love this part. $500 per person requested, $1,000 from PACs, associations, and businesses. We accept funds from associations, businesses, PACs, or other individuals. There's no limit to your donation. You know what this sounds like? Inviting a whole bunch of lobbyists, which, by the way, Cowboy State Politics was told that this invitation went out to just about every lobbyist. So if you're inviting lobbyists to a fundraiser and you're fundraising with the governor, and by the way, I've got one more piece of news about Governor Mark Gordon. It kind of means that you're setting up a pay-for-play scheme, doesn't it? That if you're inviting a bunch of lobbyists to donate to your PAC, the more money they give you, don't you think that might equate to favorable consideration legislation? Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm saying that's what the perception is, that you're inviting a bunch of lobbyists at a fundraiser. Mark Gordon is helping you fundraise. And think about this. The people that are involved in this, well, not all of them, but Bo Beitman, Tim Salazar, and Jeff Wallach were the same people that were saying not a couple of months ago that Governor Gordon, with his mask mandate, and he shut down the state, and they were saying all sorts of terrible things about Governor Gordon. But now, since they're in power, they're a bunch of friends. Now, let me just remind you, one of the things that all of these folks, Tim Salazar, Bo Beitman, Jeff Wallach, what all of them were irritated about over the governor, because the governor said this.
And I know what's happening on the environmental side. We've had several glaciers that have been delisted as glaciers in the West. It is clear that we have a warming climate. It is clear that carbon dioxide is a major contributor to that challenge. There's an urgency to addressing this issue, and it isn't going to be solved only by turning off fossil fuels. So we've looked at...
Okay, all right, I can't take it. Stop. I can't take it anymore. So that was Governor Gordon at Harvard last year. It isn't going to be solved by turning off fossil fuels alone. Now, all of those people, with the exception of Tara Nethercott, were absolutely on the governor's case about this. During the election, several of those individuals were very much against the governor's PAC that he set up for all of the redcoats. But now, since they're in power, it's completely okay to hobnob with the governor and set up a fundraiser and invite a bunch of lobbyists, which, by the way, that's called a pay-for-play scheme. But if you thought that was the end of it, my friends, and you know what? Before I start this next part, and again, this story goes on.
What's happened
Whoa!
in these states?
That was Steve Harshman. Yeah, I just get so excited on the program when I'm talking about people who pretend to be conservative. Anyway, so all of these folks were on the governor's case about everything that he's done, the mask mandate and shutting down the state and going to Harvard and talking about green energy. And now, since they're in power, well, it's totally a different story because they're in power and they can hobnob with the governor. And if evidently they've made a deal with the liberals, and that just kind of goes along with Governor Gordon's plans. And, all the pieces are starting to come together, my friends. I'm going to tell you the best part, one of the best parts, coming up next. You're going to love this. Your tax dollars at work. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, Don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. My friends, I am fired up this morning, if you couldn't tell. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening in the Wyoming legislature, and I'm telling you, my friends, the gloves are off. Welcome back to Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to talk to me, the phone number is 307-374-8989. Whatever's on your mind, go ahead and give me a call. You know, it's different than most of the time during the week. During the week, if you call in, you got to talk about what I want to talk about. Not so on Open Line Thursday. Well, as I mentioned before the break, my friends, there is so much stuff that's happening in the Wyoming Senate, and a whole bunch of it isn't even remotely conservative. Listen to this next part. Cowboy State Politics has learned that the governor spent an inordinate amount of time in the Senate chamber the other day. In fact, the bill that they were debating is that the legislature had to give approval for regulations that amounted to, I think the number I was told was over like $100,000. I'll come up with the bill that they were debating. But the interesting part of it is that Governor Gordon camped out in the Senate Vice President's office. And the Senate Vice President, Tim Salazar, went around the floor and grabbed individual senators to go over and talk to the governor so that they could be lobbied against voting for the bill. That, in the words of our good pal Lloyd Larson, is
horse crap.
That is horse crap, my friends. All of those people on the floor of the Senate were elected to represent one group of people, and that's their district, not to represent the governor. The governor, I mean, it is absolutely inappropriate for the executive to be camping out in the vice president of the Senate's office and then lobbying every single person on that floor to vote against that bill. It is absolutely against the interests of Wyoming citizens. It is against the interests of individual districts. And quite frankly, it's against the interests of individual senators. That is absolutely inappropriate, and it is unconscionable that Tim Salazar is the guy that was doing it. Now, a year ago, Tim Salazar, I would have said he's one of the most conservative people on the Senate. But what I have been observing and what I have been told that's been happening in the Wyoming Senate absolutely blows my mind. Power does funny things to people, my friends, and apparently it's doing a lot of stuff to a lot of people over in the Senate. Letting the governor can't lobby on the floor of the House. And here's the fascinating part, right? That the governor is the guy that set up a PAC to defeat conservatives in the last election. Don't forget that. And one of those conservatives that he would have loved to have defeated, not now because now they're pals, is Tim Salazar. It's absolutely amazing, my friends, that now that they're in power, they're just one big happy redcoat family. And the truth is, my friends, if the results of your actions help the left, then you, my friend, are part of the left. That is an inescapable fact. If you're too oblivious to what the results of your actions are, if you just want to be part of the cool kids club and hobnob with the liberals and the governor down at the Metropolitan and raise money because, you know, now you're in power and you can do whatever you want, regardless of if it absolutely looks like a pay-for-play scheme, because that's what it looks like from the outside, Jeff Wallach. And by the way, Jeff Wallach, you're welcome to come on this program anytime you want. I'll give you the entire hour. I'll stretch the program out for 2 hours. I'll give you all the time in the world you want, and we can debate anything that's on your mind, but you're going to answer. But if you do come on the program, we're going to talk about this little pay-for-play scheme. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So the long and the short of it is, my friends, that the wheels are starting to come off in the Wyoming Senate. They're not nearly as conservative as they made it out to be. And Bo Beitman, it's not an attack on your Senate and your members if it's true. One of the fascinating things about being me and having Cowboy state politics is that a lot of people talk to me. And again, if you're an alleged member of the media and you're hanging out in the Wyoming State Senate and you're not reporting on this, well, shame on you too. So anyway, my friends, that is pretty much what I know coming out of the Wyoming Senate, as if that wasn't enough. But we've got about 10 minutes left in the program, and there's a bunch of stuff. Let's see here, what I've got in the stack of stuff. And it's amazing. And again, one of the reasons why I started Cowboy State Politics is so that I could show you what's happening down here in Middle Swamp. That a lot of people, the Wyoming media certainly isn't going to cover any of this stuff, even if they're a party to it, even if they're watching it happen, because it doesn't suit their interests, because the Wyoming media in general, the Cowboy, the Pravda on the Platte, the Wild Pile, the Turkey Vulture, all of them are decidedly liberal. So most of the time, they're not going to report on any of this stuff. However, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again, and there's one of them in the cow pie. I believe this article was published yesterday, but it's entitled, "The Governor and the AG Say the Judge Misapplied the Law When Striking Down the Abortion Bans." And this is absolutely true. Melissa Owens is a radical leftist and really didn't pay any attention to the law whatsoever when she struck down Wyoming's abortion bans. But let's go to the article, and I quote, "The Wyoming Attorney General's office argued this week that a judge misapplied the law when she struck down 2 abortion bans in November. The AG claims in a filing that the judge leaned on an abortion-friendly doctor's testimony when proclaiming abortion as health care. Wyoming's Attorney General is arguing in court this week that the judge misapplied the law. The Wyoming Attorney General's Special Assistant Jay Jardy filed a 102-page argument with the state's Supreme Court on Monday, urging the High Court to reverse a November order declaring Wyoming's abortion bans unconstitutional. Teton County District Judge Melissa Owens misapplied the Wyoming Constitution, used abortion-friendly doctors' testimony in her decision that should have been rooted in legislative language and history, and tried to resurrect Roe v. Wade to foist her own preferred results into state law, Jardy argued in the filing. Now, his filing is on behalf of Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon, who appointed Owens in late 2021, as well as Attorney General Bridget Hill. The court filing asks the Wyoming Supreme Court to reverse the order and dismiss a pro-choice coalition's challenge against the bans. Now, the controversy surrounds the 2023 abortion bans, the Life is a Human Right Act and the abortifacient bill. And that, interestingly enough, was Tim Salazar's bill. Tim Salazar, even though, what he's doing now is not conservative at all, he was a champion of the pro-life movement. He did a really good job with that. In fact, he was on the program talking about his abortifacient bill last year. Let's see here. The Life Act, or the Life is a Human Right Act, was the legislature's attempt to bolster an earlier 2022 trigger ban that went into effect when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Owens, on November 18th, overturned that law and the chemical abortion ban as unconstitutional. Abortion is health care, Owens ruled, and is therefore a fundamental right under the Wyoming Constitution. Yeah, that is, in my opinion, and in everybody else's,
horse crap.
When striking down the bans, Owen deferred frequently to doctors who informed the court of perils that could follow women if they don't get abortions. That was improper, Jardy argued. He pointed to a case telling courts that when people challenge a law as together or facially unconstitutional, the courts need to inspect the law itself and the legislative history surrounding it. The legislative history reveals a Wyoming opposed to abortion, wrote Jardy. The Wyoming Territory's first legislature banned the practice starting in 1869, and the state legislatures that followed statehood continued those bans. Only in 1977, 4 years after the U.S. Supreme Court codified the federal right to abortion in Roe, did Wyoming concede the then legality of the practice. up to viability of the fetus and updating its laws. Newspapers, constitutional analyses, and the legislative debates that preceded the Healthcare Amendment's 2012 passage all touted it as an anti-abortion Obamacare measure, not abortion, not as a promise of abortion access either. He argued that Owens should have looked up that history to determine the will of Wyoming. Quote, she relied improperly on the expert opinions of doctors who favor abortion. By definition, an expert opinion cannot be a legislative fact because an expert opinion is not a fact, he wrote. Now, this is absolutely, I am absolutely proud of the governor for doing this, even though he's been a menace in other things. At least they are defending Wyoming's abortion bans as strongly as they possibly can. So that is a good thing, and we'll wait to see what happens there. So, my friends, I've got to end the program a little bit early today. I've got an interview I have to do at 9:15, but make sure that you stay tuned to everything that is Cowboy State Politics. Listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast. The best way that you can find that is go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or just search for Cowboy State Politics, and you'll find it anywhere that you get your podcasts. Also, I've set up a live replay feed where you can listen to all of the live programs if you miss them. If you can't listen to the program when it airs at 8 a.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can go back and listen to it there. The way you can find that page is go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, and up at the top, you'll see a link that says live replay. Hit that, and it'll show you all the live shows, and you can listen to them until your heart's content. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the program. That way you can be notified every time there's a new podcast. So anyway, my friends, that does it for this week on Cowboy State Politics Live. Have a good rest of your week and weekend, and don't miss Weekend Update on the podcast. There's a lot of content that's coming from Cowboy State Politics, and I am absolutely proud to bring it to you. Lots of news coming up. And so for now, my friends, from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.